can't hear me, put your hand up. I'm Gordon Trick. I'm not really a Kenning, but I was married to Ella Kenning for 56 years, and I knew her for 7 years before that. So I may not have Kenning blood in my veins, but I've probably got a few bruises, so that should count.
Know the trick too, Gordon.
But I wanted to tell you why you're here today. Now the obvious answer is because Joan Proteau went to a tremendous amount of work to arrange this gathering. And where are you, Joan?
I'm behind you here.
And she should be congratulated.
Thank you.
But there's another reason why you're here. If it wasn't for two people in 1927, there would be a family gathering of the family, but it would probably have taken place in Balk, St. Anna Prokie, Snake, places in Friesland, a province of Holland. But in 1927, two people had the courage to gather up their families and start a new life in Canada. And that is Karst and Jeltje Kenning. And for as most of you know, the original family name was Kenning, K-E-U-N-I-N-G. When they moved to Canada, they Canadianized it as Kenning, yes. So they, for reasons we really don't know, but I like to think it's because they saw a better future for their children. At that time, they had 9 children in Holland. One was deceased. And sadly, another Altje, or Greetje, had some mental problems and was in a home. And she stayed in Holland and did not come to Canada. And there was a little confusion getting all the family over here. Mrs. Kenning was very astute, though. She crossed the Atlantic, 7 months pregnant, which probably saved a ticket, but what it did to her, no idea. And you'll see a board in there about these people. But here, I'm quite proud, the original passport has been saved. It's got the pictures of mother and father and some of the children. After they came to Canada, there were 2 children born here. So they ended up in Canada with 3 boys and 6 girls. I hope that's right. Now, if you want to get serious about the family tree, there's a whole bunch of them. Here's one. If you can read it, it's the Kenning family in Europe, or in Holland, 1960. And curiously enough, our son Michael bought this at a used bookstore in Amsterdam 3 or 4 years ago. It only refers to the people you know as having left for Canada. I guess that was the end of their existence as far as the book is concerned. So in 1981, Ella Trick and Marilyn Fraser came up with this book, and there's a number of copies. Some of your families may have some. It's From Across the Waters, the Kenning family of Canada. And it talks about probably the first 4 generations in Canada. Has a picture of the couple, marriage picture of the couple. And more recently now, and you see them here today, there are 3 more versions. One that's on the fence from Bill Belay, one that's where all the pictures are from Brian Kenning, and then Joan Proteau has one on a desk in there, wherever she went. Yeah. I think everybody would like you to look at those family trees and see if there's any corrections to be made. Now, when the Kennings arrived in Canada, it was 1927. It was the beginning of what really was a Great Depression. They had a tough time. I've identified 6 places they lived from 1927 to 1940. These would be places they rented. None of the houses are left. The house that lasted the longest was at the corner of Highway 7 and the north perimeter. The house was there in the 1970s, and if anybody has a picture of that house, I would love to make a copy of it. I just never thought of taking a picture in those days. Finally, in 1940, it became established, and they bought the farm in Stonewall. It was known as the Bennett Farm, but it's now been owned by the Kennings for 69 years, so I hope it's now known as the Kenning Farm. It's on Highway 7, a mile south of the road off of Stonewall. Now there's one thing to remember. This is 1927 when they came to Canada. And in those days, you just didn't pack a bag and go over to Schiphol Airport, hop a 747. In fact, 1927 was the year that Lindbergh was soloed the Atlantic, so things were different then. People knew coming from Europe that they would never likely see Europe again, and they would never likely see their relatives again. A tremendous breaking off from all your past. Fortunately, and in a sense, while Mr. and Mrs. Kenning were still alive, contact was made with the family again. In 1952, Ella and I lived in England for a year, and in the spring of '53, which is 26 years after the Kennings came to Canada, we visited Holland and were able to visit both sides of the family. To Ella, it was a tremendous opportunity. She could sort of bridge the gap between her parents and all their relatives in Holland. And at that time, Ella could speak Fries fairly fluently, so that made it a lot easier. Bear with me, I won't be long. But to get to my point, that's why you're here today, because two people. And I've lived in three different countries, but in a different time frame, when you knew all you had to do was hop in an airplane and go back to your roots. That wasn't the case in those days. It's hard to believe what it was like, and of course many Manitobans and many Canadians in the early days went through that experience. But I hope, perhaps, I think I've covered everything. The other family history is one that Ella and I have been compiling on the computer with the help of our grandson and granddaughter, who know how to run it. It has the advantage, there's a lot of text in there. I'm trying to put in a history of each of the families, the original families, and it'll take any number of pictures. Sadly, it's got all the obituaries in, but it has that capability. But I'd like for a moment then to just perhaps stop for a moment and think about these two people and think about what change they've made to their life. We don't know why they came to Canada. We don't know why they came to Winnipeg. But I like to think they came with the slogan, they came for the future. The future of all of you people here today. Because that's, without them, you wouldn't be here. Half of you wouldn't be here. Half of you would have different partnerships. So, one way or another. And I think what's happened today verifies that their belief they came for the future was well-founded. So we can stop for a moment and just think about Jeltje and Karst and what they went through for all of us. One last thing, they came here in 1927. I hope that in 2027, some of you will organize a gathering. If I'm around, you'll have to carry me in. But the centenary of the Kennings in Canada would be a wonderful opportunity, and I hope it carries on. Thank you very much.